The stars were quiet that day. Too quiet. I sat alone on the outer deck of the listening station above Draylen 6, a forgotten outpost the Galactic Council only kept running out of habit. Space around this quadrant had been peaceful for decades, meaning nothing ever happened, and nobody important ever came out here. We monitored trade routes, sent out pointless security reports, and collected dust. I hated every second of it. They said the humans had been put in their place long ago, that they'd been brought into the fold after the integration mandate of 781. But anyone who's ever actually met a human knows they were never truly folded into anything. They were watching, waiting, nursing something dark behind those strange, unpredictable eyes. I knew it the moment the alarms went off. Unidentified vessel entering Sector 7G, the station's AI said flatly. I stood up, half asleep, not expecting anything. Probably a trade freighter gone off course again. But then came the tremor in the metal under my boots, a deep, low vibration that felt wrong. The other officers snapped awake as I rushed to the main console. "Magnify," I barked. The screen blinked twice, and then the image came through, a warship. Big, black, angular, no transponder code, no markings, no escort, just there, like it had appeared from the blackness of space itself. "Is that a council vessel?" one of the younger officers asked, confused. I didn't answer, because it wasn't. I'd seen every warship class in the archives. This one didn't match anything. It was older than anything in the Council's fleet, but also somehow more advanced. Brutal and elegant. It looked like it was built for one purpose: domination. My chest tightened as I zoomed in on the hull. And then I saw it, burned into the plating in jagged, angry lettering, like a scar carved into steel. Earthborn retribution. Human. God help us. The Council never took humans seriously. They were the punchline of every joke in the officer academies. Emotional, chaotic, undisciplined. They rose too fast and asked too many questions. So the Council smothered them with treaties, limitations, and puppet governments. They even disbanded Earth's last true fleet after the Mars Accord, sent their best engineers to die building wormhole gates and mining moons. And now, one of their warships had just crossed into Council space, uninvited, unannounced, and fully armed. By the time the Admiral arrived, we were all silent, watching the warship hover just outside strike range. It didn't move, it didn't speak, it just waited, like it knew the longer it stayed silent, the more scared we'd get. The Council sent a hail, no response. They sent a diplomatic package, still nothing. That's when I realized this wasn't an accident. They wanted us to feel it. 2 hours later, the Council held an emergency summit. The 13 high seats met in orbit above Trellix Prime. I was assigned to escort duty, forced to sit quietly while the most arrogant, bloated creatures in the galaxy argued over what to do. "This is obviously a rogue element," spat Lord Ventric of the Charn Dominion. "A relic from Earth's colonial age. It should be vaporized on sight." "Wrong," muttered High Scholar Endrin of the Lith Order. "The energy signature matches nothing in human history. It's a new design, purpose-built, funded, which begs the question, by whom?" They bickered, insulted each other, blamed every faction except themselves. And then the warship moved, just 1 inch forward, and every sensor lit up like a sun flare. Weapons, shields, life signatures, all active. I watched the color drain from the Council's faces. In that one small movement, the humans had said everything they needed to say. "You're not in charge anymore. My name is Caden Brawl. I was born under the Council. I believed in their order, their laws, their control. But that day, staring at the void beyond the window, at that silent, monstrous thing that had come from a forgotten world, I felt something I'd never felt before. Fear. Real, soul-deep fear. Because deep down, I knew. This wasn't a message. This wasn't a mistake. This was revenge. And it was just beginning. They called it a controlled diplomatic outreach. That was the official term used when the Council tried to send a delegation to a fully armed, unknown warship sitting silently on the edge of Council space. No one wanted to say the truth aloud. We had no idea what they were planning, and fear was crawling through every corridor of power like mold. The Council had never feared anything. Not truly. Not until now. I was assigned to escort duties again, this time aboard the Verdant Honor, a sleek, over-polished diplomatic cruiser with barely any weapons and an excess of luxury. Like all Council vessels, it was built for show, not for war. The kind of ship you'd take to sign peace treaties while sipping wine and pretending the universe was in order. As we approached the human warship, the silence from its side was still complete. No scans were returned, no comms opened, no movements. Just that looming black monolith, like a god's fist clenched around invisible fury. The delegation was led by Councillor Thren Solari, a man I'd always seen as untouchable. Tall, imperious, eyes like cold glass. He spoke 10 languages, chaired 3 sub-factions, and had once ordered the destruction of an entire colony to preserve economic equilibrium. But when he stood before the viewport, watching Earthborn retribution grow larger in the frame, I saw his hands tremble. Barely, but it was there. He tried to hide it. We all did. The shuttle docked to a port that extended without invitation. Mechanical, automatic, emotionless. It was as if the human ship had been expecting us. Preparing. The boarding crew was small. Thren, 2 assistants, 1 translator drone, and me. I didn't ask why I was chosen. I already knew. Because I had a history with humans. My father had served in the Terran re-education program after the integration mandate. He used to come home drunk and broken, saying things like, "They don't learn like we do. They learn deeper, meaner. When you hurt them, they don't forget. They plan." I never believed him. Until that moment. Until the doors opened and we stepped into the bowels of the ship. The inside of Earthborn retribution was not like any Council vessel I'd ever seen. It wasn't clean. It wasn't symmetrical. It didn't sparkle with artificial light or hum with polite engineering. It was raw, functional, heavy. The walls were thick steel, patched with battle scars and crude reinforcements. Wires hung exposed. Lights flickered not from power failure, but from deliberate design. And everywhere were symbols, scratched into metal, etched into doors, stamped in red across support beams, Earth flags, old ones, pre-integration, a faded eagle, a shattered globe. The names of human colonies long thought extinct. They weren't trying to intimidate us with size. They were trying to remind us who they were, what we did, what they lost. We were led by no one. No crew greeted us, no guides, just blinking red markers in the floor that pulsed one by one, guiding us deeper into the ship. At one point, Thren stopped and said, "This is psychological warfare." No one responded. Because we knew it was true, the deeper we went, the colder it got. Not just physically, though the air felt like it had been recycled through war zones, but emotionally, spiritually. Like the walls themselves were waiting for something terrible to be unleashed. We reached what must have been the central chamber, a massive circular room with a single chair in the center, facing away from us. One man sat there. He didn't turn when we entered. He didn't rise. He just said, in perfect Council dialect, "You took our children." Thren stepped forward, clearing his throat. I am Counselor Thren Solari, emissary of the Galactic Council. We come in peace, seeking clarity on your presence and intentions. You are in violation of— Shut up. The voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. It was flat. Human. And it cut through us like ice. He finally stood. Turned. He was old. Not in the frail sense, but in the weathered, unyielding way of men who had survived too much. His face was covered in deep scars. One eye was cybernetic, blinking with crimson pulses. His body was lean, not bulky, wrapped in practical armor that looked pieced together from salvage. And his hands, gods, his hands, were black with burn marks, as if he'd clawed his way out of fire. "My name," he said, "is Commander Roth, born on Earth, exiled to Rigel, watched my people get sterilized by your cleansing drones, watched my son get taken for integration conditioning, watched my wife hang herself in a council facility while you called it progress." No one spoke. "Now you watch me." Thren tried to recover. "Commander, there are peaceful channels for— I'm not here for peace. I'm here for memory, for the 100 million of us you erased from your archives, for the colonies you reduced to ash and labeled rebellious, for every Terran who vanished while your clean little cities celebrated unity." He took one step forward. "I'm here to teach you how humans remember, how we bury names in steel, how we name our bullets after your cities." I reached for my sidearm without meaning to. His eye caught the movement instantly. "Do it," he said. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I wasn't looking at a man. I was looking at the product of everything the Council had tried to suppress. And he was stronger than any of us. He didn't kill us. He didn't need to. He let us leave, escorted again by silence and cold air and flickering lights. No threat was made. No declaration of war. Just his final words, echoing in my mind as we left the ship. "The Council will fall. Not because we want war, but because you forgot we were human." When we returned to the summit, Thren lied. He said the humans were isolated radicals, that they posed no immediate threat, that negotiations were ongoing. The Council clung to that lie like a drunk to an empty bottle. But I saw what they didn't. Roth hadn't shown us that warship to negotiate. He showed it to warn us, the way a storm growls before it hits the coast, and the fools ignored it. 2 days later, the Council dispatched 3 battleships to escort Earthborn retribution out of regulated space. They were vaporized in 62 seconds. No survivors. The footage, what little remained, showed human weapons tech far beyond Council capabilities. Plasma kinetics, cloaked drone arrays, gravity distorters, shit we hadn't even theorized yet. But the scariest thing? They didn't run. They didn't retreat. They just hovered there, waiting. By the end of the week, 16 more human ships appeared in scattered locations. All old designs, some from centuries ago, but heavily modified, bristling with weaponry, and powered by energy signatures that made no sense. Then came the message. Not from Roth. Not from any human leader. Just a signal broadcast on every frequency across Council space. "This is not conquest. This is memory. We are the ones you buried, and we remember everything." Chaos followed. Council worlds began rioting. Suppressed Terran-descended colonies declared neutrality, or worse, allegiance to the human fleet. Trading partners cut ties. Border security collapsed. And yet the Council still refused to admit what was happening. They called it a localized insurgence, a crisis of perception. They wrote reports, held meetings, threatened sanctions. But the truth was this: humanity had been preparing. And the galaxy had been laughing at them for too long. Me? I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Roth's face, that dead calm, that unwavering stare. I started pulling records, old files, restricted archives, things my clearance should never have given me. I found footage from the Mars massacre, the purge of Europa Station, the sterilization of New Providence, and for the first time in my life, I felt something worse than fear. Guilt, because I had served this machine. I had believed in it. And now I was watching the ghosts of the past come back, not to beg, not to ask for justice, but to erase everything the Council had built. This wasn't just a war, it was a reckoning. And deep down, I knew. It had only just begun. The first world to fall wasn't attacked. It surrendered. Draylen 9, a mining colony on the edge of the Telvarin Loop, once considered the Council's model for post-human integration, lowered its shields before a single human shot was fired. Not because they were weak, not because they were bribed, but because they remembered. Half the population there were Terran descendants, men and women born of Earth blood, raised under Council indoctrination, told for generations that their heritage was a burden, that their ancestors were violent, primitive, dangerous. And now those same ancestors had returned, in ships that bled silence, bearing scars they hadn't healed, carrying truths the Council had spent centuries burying under political slogans and sanitized history. When Earthborn retribution entered Draylen 9's orbit, the people didn't scream, they saluted. Back on Trellix Prime, the Council was coming undone. You could smell it in the air, the perfume of desperation, bureaucracy burning from the inside out. The high seats argued behind locked doors. Every hour brought new lies. The humans are fractured. This is a rogue fleet, not an organized rebellion. We mustn't overreact. They were still pretending the old rules applied. Diplomacy, sanctions, blockades. They had grown too used to winning without war, to silencing without blood. But this wasn't the old galaxy anymore. This was the age of recollection. And humans? They had remembered everything. I sat in my quarters, watching intercepted broadcasts from the human fleet. They didn't speak often. But when they did, their words spread like wildfire across every black market signal and pirate stream in the outer systems. No threats, no propaganda, just images. Videos of sterilization camps, once called reformation clinics, footage of child separation facilities disguised as education transition centers, audio recordings of Council officials, some still in power, giving orders to cleanse dissenters under the guise of peacekeeping. They didn't create fear, they exposed truth. And the truth was more terrifying than any weapon. The most damning came 3 days after Draylen 9's surrender. A live feed, impossible to trace, impossible to block, appeared on every screen, everywhere, from bar counters on mining rigs to the grand hall of the Council itself. The screen showed a man, Commander Roth. But this time he wasn't standing on a warship. He stood inside an old, rusted classroom, empty desks, a chalkboard still bearing the faded word, Unity. This was the first re-education site, he said. Rigel Station, Sector 4, Year 782 post-integration. Some of you recognize it. He paused. I was 12 when they brought me here. He walked slowly between the desks. They told us Earth was gone, that we had been liberated, that our parents were criminals, our culture barbaric. They fed us Council slogans and nutrient paste, and made us watch holograms of smiling aliens talking about galactic harmony. He stopped in front of a small desk. They beat us when we cried in our own language. His voice didn't crack. It didn't rise. It was flat, controlled, deadly. And now you call this war. The feed cut out. That broadcast did what no weapon could have done. Council colonies started whispering. Outer worlds began refusing supply routes. Officers with Terran blood disappeared from their posts overnight, defecting in silence. Entire systems stopped responding to Council commands. The center was crumbling, but the high seats still clung to their polished chairs, painting the rebellion as terrorism, the warships as staged relics, Roth as a madman. Their arrogance was a sickness they couldn't cure, and it was spreading. I had spent my life believing in order. Born on Polora 3, raised in council academies, trained to see humans as inconvenient, not evil, not monsters, just inferior, fragile, emotionally unstable, needing guidance. That's what they always said. The council uplifts. The council civilizes. The council preserves peace. But now I couldn't stop hearing Roth's voice. We remember everything. I was summoned to a private briefing 2 days later, not with the high seats. They didn't speak to soldiers anymore. This was deeper, quieter. A sub-faction called the Viral Accord, old security officials, intelligence officers, shadow operatives, the council's hidden fist. The meeting room was dark. No names, no titles, just voices and flickering data screens showing the slow bleed of loyalty across the outer ring. A grizzled man, face half machine, eyes red with sleeplessness, looked at me and said, "We need to kill Roth." Silence. Another voice spoke. Female, calm. "Cut off the head. Collapse the myth. These colonies are rallying around his voice, not just his fleet. He's more than a commander now. He's a symbol." I didn't speak. I couldn't, because I knew what they didn't. Killing Roth wouldn't stop this. It would ignite it. They assigned me to a covert ops team. Our mission: board Earthborn retribution, locate Roth, terminate. I didn't say no. Saying no would have meant execution, but in my gut, I already knew. This mission was suicide. We launched from a stealth cruiser outside Zarich Field. 5 of us, elite, trained for zero-atmo infiltration, armed with pulse rifles, neural dampeners, thermal cloaks. We breached the hull silently, magnet locks keeping our boots from drifting. And then, we found nothing. No resistance. No alarms. Just silence, like the ship wanted us there. As we moved deeper, I noticed it again. The markings. But they weren't symbols this time. They were names, hundreds, thousands, etched into the walls with blades, lasers, plasma cutters, each name labeled with a council death record. Date, location, method. Some were children. Some were entire families. One of the names was my uncle's. I never knew he'd died in a Terran realignment. Never asked. The first to die was Rek, our explosives expert. He stepped into a hallway rigged with sonic mines hidden in the walls. No warning, just a pulse. Silent, invisible, and blood sprayed across the corridor like paint. By the time his body hit the ground, we were already falling back. But the doors closed behind us, trapped, hunted. One by one, they died. Not by soldiers, not by gunfire, by memory. We opened a sealed door, only to find a chamber filled with re-education logs. The faces of every child processed through Rigel, screaming, crying, pleading in languages long dead. Joran, the comms lead, dropped his rifle and fell to his knees. "I didn't know," he kept whispering. "I didn't know." He shot himself in the head 5 minutes later. By the time I reached the central core, I was alone. And Roth was waiting. He didn't point a gun. He didn't wear armor. He stood beside a wall of glass, overlooking the void. "You came to kill me," he said without turning. I didn't respond. "Do it." His voice was calm. I raised my weapon, but my hand shook, because I didn't see a villain. I saw a man who had watched his people erased while the galaxy applauded, and I realized this wasn't war. This was justice. Slow, calculated, inevitable. I lowered the gun. He turned to me then, and what he said burned into me deeper than any wound. "You can't stop us, not because we're stronger, but because you already lost the only war that mattered." "What war?" I asked. He smiled. "The war for truth." He let me live. said I had a choice. Tell them what you saw, or stay loyal and die with them. Either way, the council ends. As I left that ship, alone, drifting toward a rescue beacon, I knew what I would do. I'd spent my life believing a lie, but now, I believed in something else. Something far more dangerous. I believed in humans. And that made me the enemy. The problem with an empire isn't the enemy at the gates. It's the rot in the walls. By the time the council realized this, it was already too late. 3 days after I returned from Earthborn retribution, the council declared Directive 17 Black, a system-wide lockdown of all Terran-descended populations in sensitive sectors. They called it a protective measure, said it was temporary, said it would restore order. What it did was spark riots in 12 star systems. You don't cage the children of the forgotten and expect silence. Not anymore. Not when Roth's voice was already echoing through every back channel, smuggled signal, and black market data stream in the quadrant. This isn't about vengeance, he said in one broadcast. It's about remembering who we were and who you made us become. The council kept trying to fight him with legislation. Roth was using human memory as a warhead, and it was working. It started small. A power plant on Varix 2 refused to send energy quotas to the central grid. A patrol squad in the Laurent Expanse vanished after local complications. A council officer on Helvian 7 was found crucified to his own command post with the words, "For Rigel," carved into the steel above him. Each event was dismissed as an isolated anomaly. But I knew what it was. The collapse. And it was spreading like a sickness through the bones of the Empire. High Counselor Thren Solari, the same man who had stood in front of Roth and called him a terrorist, now found himself trapped inside the fortified embassy on Deimos Prime. His own security forces had turned on him, not with guns, but with abandonment. No one came when he called. No shuttles responded. Not a single message got out. He lasted 3 days, then someone leaked the surveillance footage. Solari, curled on the floor of his office, sobbing into his diplomatic robes, screaming at an empty comms screen as the city burned around him. When the camera cut to static, no one ever saw him again. No human had laid a finger on him. They didn't have to. I sat in the shadows of an old observation post above Barros Station, watching the council's influence shrivel in real time. Their grand networks, once pulsing with control, were silent now, replaced by rogue frequencies filled with human names, human stories, human pain. It was poetry made from ashes, a rebellion built on truth, not tanks. And the terrifying part? No one was fighting back, not really, because somewhere deep inside, the galaxy knew. They'd always known. The humans had been wronged. And now, they were just balancing the scale. An old council veteran found me one night. Drunk and limping through the silent corridors of a derelict checkpoint. He recognized me from the covert team, asked if I still had the kill order for Roth. I said no. He asked why. I told him, because Roth doesn't need to win. He just needs us to admit we were wrong. The man laughed so hard he fell over, and then he shot himself in the head. The council made its last mistake when it tried to silence the Morellis broadcast. A small Terran-run info stream operating from a hidden location in the Rotary Belt. Morellis had become famous for leaking council atrocities. But this time, they aired something worse than any war crime. A confession, a live interview with director Helvan Para, former head of the council's Cultural Realignment Division, retired, forgotten, dying of brain decay. But he remembered. And what he remembered tore the galaxy apart. We didn't just erase their history, he said, blinking into the camera. We engineered shame. We rewrote textbooks. We replaced mothers with monitors. We told their children their ancestors were monsters. and we punished them for mourning. And when that wasn't enough, we sterilized entire sectors. It wasn't for peace. It was because they scared us. Within hours, every major hub with a human population went dark, not destroyed, just flipped. The control centers stopped sending updates, trade networks vanished, and a new signal emerged. Simple, low bandwidth, impossible to trace. It showed one thing: a flame, burning slowly in the dark. Below it, 3 words: "We remember now." I watched the panic spread across Council Command. Fleet generals shouting for orders, governors begging for reinforcements, intel officers throwing around phrases like soft coup, viral insurrection, memetic warfare. No one knew how to stop it, because it wasn't ships or bombs. It was awareness, a kind of viral awakening. People weren't rebelling because they were paid or afraid or desperate. They were rebelling because they saw the truth. And truth, when you've buried it long enough, kills faster than fire. That was when Roth struck the first core world. Not with a fleet, but with a drop pod. One man. Straight into the capital square of Galaris, one of the Council's richest, most fortified planets. His name was Vren Halden. He was born in Council custody, raised in an indoctrination facility, branded with a Terran ID at birth, trained to serve, to obey, to hate his own origin. He stood before a crowd of tens of thousands. Council enforcers moved to silence him. The crowd moved faster. By the time the enforcers hit the pavement, Vren was on the steps of the High Tribunal, holding a single drive in his hand. He uploaded its contents into the Galaris mainframe. It crashed within 7 minutes. When the screens came back online, every citizen saw the same thing. The Truth Protocol. A full decryption of classified council documents, everything. The sterilization orders, the fake peace treaties, the bribes, the black site prisons, even the names of the council members who'd ordered executions disguised as reforms. By midnight, the city had no functioning government. By morning, the planetary defense grid was under human control. The council sent 3 fleets to retake it. None arrived, because half the crews never left dock. The rest defected mid-flight. Some even flew straight to Roth. I sat in my quarters again, this time on a transport to a world I'd once helped stabilize as a junior officer. I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I was starting to understand something I'd never wanted to believe. The humans weren't coming for revenge. They were coming to end something. Something old. Rotten. Poisoned at the root. They weren't burning the galaxy down. They were clearing the ground for something new. I received a message that night. Encrypted. No sender, no trace. It was a video. Roth. He looked tired. Worn, but calm. Like a man who'd already accepted the cost of what he was doing. "I'm not a hero," he said. "I'm not trying to build a better empire. I'm just trying to end this one. They called us monsters, savages, said we were too wild to be trusted. But they used our blood to build their peace. And now they're choking on it. We won't rule. We won't rebuild the same system with new flags. We'll remind the stars that humans are not cattle. We are not tools. We are not projects. We are fire. And when this is done, they will never forget again." I don't know how he knew to send that message to me. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he sent it to thousands. Or maybe he knew I had already switched sides, not with words, but with belief. Because the truth was a weapon I couldn't unsee. And I knew, deep in my bones, so did the rest of the galaxy. The council lasted another 6 weeks, not because they fought well, but because bureaucracies die slow, like dying stars, collapsing in on their own pride. By the end of it, even the loyalists started asking the same question. What if the humans were right? They called it Fortress Syrax, a city-sized orbital complex carved into the frozen rings of planet Sevis, the last true stronghold of the High Council. It wasn't built for comfort. It wasn't built for diplomacy. It was built for exactly one thing: survival. For centuries, it was nothing more than a rumor, a ghost facility buried in redacted files and old conspiracy chatter. But now, as the outer systems fell like dominoes and the Council's voice became a whisper, the last of the ruling elite crawled into it like rats into a sealed box, praying the walls would hold. They wouldn't, because Roth had found it. And unlike the rest of the war, he didn't move silently this time. He announced it to everyone. It was an encrypted, real-time broadcast, so clean and flawless, the Council couldn't block it even if they wanted to. Roth stood before a black backdrop, the emblem of the old Earth resistance glowing faintly behind him, a broken circle surrounding a single burning star. His voice was lower than usual, slower, measured. This is not a siege. This is not a war. This is your sentence. He leaned forward slightly, eyes burning into the feed. For generations, you controlled history. You bled us, erased us, repurposed our dead into lessons in textbooks written by murderers. You sterilized our women. You executed our sons. You made our pain into policy. And still, you believed you were right. His jaw tightened. So now, we let the galaxy watch what happens to tyrants when truth finally outlives fear. Syrax is yours. For now. But it will not survive the week. The screen faded to black. And just like that, Roth declared the end. I was aboard the Vigilant Ember, part of the human-aligned fleet that now completely surrounded Syrax. A ship unlike the crude, scarred vessels we'd seen earlier. Sleek, modern. Built not just from salvaged anger, but from real engineering. Built for war, and yet it felt wrong. There was no thrill, no glory, just silence across every channel. Everyone knew what Syrax was, who was inside, what it meant to destroy it. But no one said it out loud. We weren't just wiping out the Council. We were wiping out what came before. Inside Syrax, the last loyalists gathered. 5 high seats remained. The rest were dead, missing, or had fled to neutral territories, pretending they'd never belonged to the regime. Among the survivors was High Minister Kalen Var, the architect of the integration mandate. The same man who wrote the policy that broke Earth into silence. He looked like a corpse propped in silk robes. Hollow eyes, ashen skin, still drinking council wine as if it mattered. They won't dare breach Syrax, he whispered to his advisors. It's a symbol. If they destroy it, they destroy their own justification. He didn't understand. Humans didn't want symbols. They wanted closure. On the 5th day, Roth didn't send ships. He sent a messenger. A woman. Terran-born, dark-skinned, tall, strong in that quiet, dangerous way survivors often are. She was escorted alone, unarmed, through the shielded entry gate of Syrax under a flag of non-aggression. Her name was Kira Halden, sister of Vren Halden, the man who had exposed Galaris. The Council allowed her in, convinced it was a stunt, another broadcast, a performance. But she brought no threats, only a tablet and a question. The tablet contained the restructure doctrine, a new order, a human-drafted charter outlining what would follow after Syrax fell. No replacement council, no Terran Empire, no war of conquest, just 3 core rules. 1. No one governs by bloodline. 2. No history is ever erased again. 3. Those who watched and did nothing will answer, even if they never fired a shot. Kalen Var laughed when he read it. You're still human, he said to her. Still arrogant, still emotional. You think you can build a galaxy without hierarchy? Without control? Kira didn't argue. She just looked at him. The kind of look that made me wonder what she had seen before this war began. "I'm not here to convince you," she said. "I'm here to offer you a choice. Die with your lies, or live with your crimes." They threw her out within the hour, and Roth stopped sending warnings. The siege began on day 6, but it didn't start with bombardment. It started with leaks. Every transmission Sirax sent, intercepted, every food shipment halted, their internal systems overloaded with viruses, their own artificial intelligence disabled from within. The fleet never fired a shot. But Sirax starved. One by one the loyalists began to unravel. Some took their own lives, others tried to defect. A few even begged for mercy. None were given, because Roth wasn't seeking surrender, he was offering judgment. And the jury was the galaxy itself. But something changed on day 7. Inside the fleet, among the humans who had followed Roth to the edge of galactic justice, cracks began to form. Not from fear, from conscience. One of Roth's own captains, a grizzled ex-council defector named Brannock, confronted him in the war chamber. "We've won," Brannock said. "The council is gone. Their worlds are ours. Their systems are dead. Why Sirax? Why this slow grind?" Roth didn't look at him. He was watching the live feeds, the faces of Sirax's defenders, the ones still clinging to the lie. "They still believe they were right," Roth said. Brannock slammed his fist against the console. "And they're relics. Let them rot." But Roth shook his head slowly. "It's not enough to kill the body. You have to kill the memory." Silence. And that's when I realized Roth didn't just want justice. He wanted absolution. Later that night, I spoke to Kira. I found her standing at the viewport of the Ember, eyes fixed on Sirax. She didn't speak at first, so I did. "He's not the same man anymore." She nodded. "No, he's not." "Does he know it?" She shrugged. "Does it matter?" The final strike came at dawn, Sevis time. No ships, no weapons, just a single satellite drone, loaded with a council-wide broadcast algorithm. It activated as Sirax lost power, and the whole galaxy saw what Roth wanted them to see. Not executions, not fire, just truth, video logs, reports. Interrogation records, genetic modification programs, death quotas, fabricated rebel attacks, censored footage of council officers watching colonies die. Everything, raw, untouched, the naked horror of the machine that had ruled for generations. And in the final segment, the camera showed Sirax, dimming from orbit. Then cut to Roth. One last time. "You had the chance to tell the truth. You chose silence. Now you'll be remembered not as leaders, but as a warning." He didn't say another word. The feed cut, and Sirax went dark forever. The explosion wasn't massive. It wasn't beautiful. It was clinical, contained, precise, almost merciful. Until the smoke cleared, and only the shattered rings of Sevis remained, glinting with the twisted debris of what once ruled the stars. The war was over. The council was dead. But something else had begun, and no one knew what it would look like. Roth vanished after that. Some said he boarded a sleeper ship and disappeared into deep space. Others claimed he died on Sirax, one last act of sacrifice. Me? I think he knew the galaxy didn't need him anymore. Not as a leader, not as a symbol, just as a memory. I live now on a reclaimed Terran colony once called Zone 51D. It has a real name again. Kalar's Reach. We teach history here. The real kind. No edits, no redactions, just truth. Messy, brutal, human truth. Because that's what this was always about. Not revenge, not rebellion, not even freedom. Just one question. Will you remember us now? History doesn't end with the last gunshot. It starts there. And the first thing it does is ask, what now? 6 months after Syrax fell, the galaxy was a mess. The Council's infrastructure collapsed faster than expected. Trade networks vanished. Star routes went unpoliced. Entire planets turned inward, suspicious of everyone, including their own allies. No central authority. No universal law. Just silence where the Empire used to be. Some called it liberation. Others called it a mistake. I'd relocated to Kalar's Reach, one of the reclaimed Terran colonies. It was where we stored most of the historical archives, the real ones. We spent our days filtering through decades of truth that had been buried beneath Council propaganda. Executions labeled as resource redirection. Genocides filed under system optimization. People wept reading the files. Others went numb. A few went mad. Truth, it turned out, wasn't always healing. Sometimes it just cut deeper. The broadcasts stopped after Syrax. Roth was gone. No public statements. No sightings. No orders. Some believed he died with the fortress. Others believed he was watching us, waiting to see if we'd repeat the same mistakes. But me? I believed something darker. He didn't leave because the job was done. He left because he didn't want to be the one who broke what came next. In his absence, the human coalition began to fracture. You could feel it first in the airwaves. Murmurs about new systems, new flags, new ideals. One group called themselves the Purifiers. They believed humanity should govern all former council systems, not with vengeance, but with corrective dominance. Their logic was simple. They ruled. We suffered. Now we rule. They weren't talking about rebuilding. They were talking about replacing. Another faction, more subtle, more dangerous, was gaining support under the name the Remembered Flame. They spoke in Roth's language, quoted his speeches, shared clips of his voice over distorted music, set to images of burning council archives and soldiers bowing to Terran flags. But Roth had never wanted that. Not power, not glory, only truth, only memory. Now his legacy was being twisted into a banner, and no one was strong enough to stop it. I sat across from Kira Halden one rainy afternoon in the outpost's archive wing. She looked more tired than I'd ever seen her. She hadn't taken any title after the war. She could have led the whole system if she wanted. But instead, she taught history to children. The most powerful survivor of the revolution, reduced, or perhaps elevated, to a school teacher. You see the signs? I asked her. She didn't look up. They were always there. The Purifiers. Small men chasing shadows, she said. They think because they bled, they get to own the future. And the flame? She paused longer. They believe Roth was a god. I frowned. And he wasn't? No, she said softly. He was a man, and that's what made him dangerous. He knew pain, he knew patience, and he knew when to stop. I leaned forward. What if the people who come after him don't? She met my eyes. That's why you're here. She handed me a data pad, encrypted, old code, pre-war style. I ran the sequence and it opened a personal log, Roth's. If you're reading this, it means I've gone quiet, either by choice or by death. You'll be tempted to fill the silence with structure, systems, flags, faces on coins. Don't. Let the silence settle first. Let people choose their own voice. If you build too fast, you'll build something that looks like the Council, just with your name stamped over the blood. We didn't win to replace tyrants. We won to bury the machine. Don't start it up again. Please. I read the words twice, then once more, and each time they hit harder, because we were already building again, and we were doing it with blood still fresh in the dirt. 1 week later, the first bomb went off. Planet Iridia, Sector 8, a peaceful colony, majority Terran descendants, neutral during the conflict, never aligned with either side. A school was vaporized, 43 dead. Message left behind. No more half-blood systems. Only human unity. Signed, the Purifiers. The council we tried to build, a loose alliance of free systems, demanded retaliation. Kira begged for patience, but the fires moved faster than reason. By the time investigations started, 2 more colonies had been hit. 1 human majority, 1 alien minority. Same message, same group, same signature. The coalition began assigning response units. At first they were called defenders, then enforcers, then, without anyone saying it aloud, judicators. Same armor, same drones, same methods, just with our flag now. I saw a raid report. A suspected purifier cell on Dravet 3 had been cleansed. No trial, no evidence confirmed. 1 survivor, a teenager, identified as indoctrinated, executed, just like that. Roth's silence echoed louder than ever. We had killed the council, but the rot was still alive. One night, in a deep spiral of insomnia and guilt, I decoded the rest of Roth's log. The final entry was dated 1 day before the Syrax broadcast. I know what comes next. We were forged in pain. Some of us won't know how to live without it. They'll twist our wounds into weapons, wrap our scars in banners. If they do, don't look for me. Look for the ones who still mourn. They're the only ones who remember why we fought. A month passed. The coalition became more military. The flame began seizing abandoned council facilities to preserve the legacy. The Purifiers declared 5 border systems as human sovereign space. War hadn't returned. But peace was dying in whispers, and I kept asking the same question. Had we traded one empire for another? I visited the ruins of Syrax again. Not officially. I told no one. Just boarded an old shuttle and drifted through the orbit of what was once the galaxy's most terrifying monument. Now only debris and silence. I recorded a message. Roth, if you're alive, we need you. Not as a warrior, not as a commander, but as a reminder. Your silence is becoming dangerous. People are using your name to do things you would have burned them for. Please, say something. Or we will become what we killed. I sent it. No reply came. Not that day, not the next. But one morning, a new signal pulsed through the Terran core. No announcement, no speech, just a location, Rigel Station, the place where it all began. Where the re-education program had torn thousands of Terrans from their identities, where Roth had been made. The signal was brief. 3 words. Return to origin. No one knew who sent it. Not the flame, not the purifiers, not the coalition, but the message spread. And thousands began the pilgrimage, not as soldiers, not as politicians, just as witnesses. Because in the shadow of victory, we had forgotten the cost. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to remember again. It was never meant to be a shrine. Rigel Station was supposed to be a graveyard, a forgotten relic drifting in the cold reaches of Sector 4. The Council had shut it down decades ago, sealed the records, wiped it from maps. And yet, there it was, still floating, still intact, still humming with the ghosts of everything we tried to forget. When the message came, return to origin. It didn't come with fanfare. No banners, no names, no demands. Just those 3 words, pulsing across every unregulated channel, reaching ex-council colonies, Terran uprisings, frontier worlds, and even the loyalist remnants who still whispered of order. And they came. All of them. Kira and I stood on the command deck of the Vigilant Ember, watching the traffic converge like insects to a flame. By the 2nd day, over 700 ships had dropped anchor around Rigel. By the 4th, it was over 2,000. Terran freighters, ex-mercenary cruisers, retrofitted council carriers bearing scorch marks from battles they'd never recorded. Even a few alien ships, hesitant but curious, every soul on board drawn by the same question. What now? Because the war was over. The council was dead. And still, the galaxy didn't feel free. On the 5th day, Rigel Station opened. No announcement, just a slow shift in its orientation, like a sleeper stretching after a long nightmare. The docking bays, once sealed behind 6 layers of blast shutters, exposed themselves one by one. There was no AI, no defense grid, no guards, just open doors, waiting. Kira was the first to enter. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't bring a weapon. She just walked. I followed. The moment we passed through the airlock, the silence hit like a physical wall. No hum of life support, no flickering lights, just stale, recycled air and the faint smell of old metal and older blood. We descended level by level, passing classrooms, punishment cells, memory erasure chambers. Everything had been left exactly as it was. The council never dismantled the station. They simply abandoned it. Like a crime scene too filthy to clean. We reached the center room, the same room Roth had shown in the broadcast all those months ago. The old desks, the chalkboard, the word Unity still faintly visible, though half erased. And in the middle of the room, on a rusted desk, was a single data drive. No guards, no traps, just the weight of everything we tried to ignore. Kira picked it up. Her hands shook for the first time since Serax. She plugged it into her terminal and opened the file. Roth's voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, then the revolution is over. The blood has dried. The tyrants are dust. But I know people, especially my own. We don't know how to live in silence. We need something to fight, to control, to burn. That's what the council made us into. And if we're not careful, we'll carry that curse forward. So here's my last order. Don't build another empire. Don't let my name become a weapon. Don't let pain become a currency. Let this place, this horror, be the last time anyone thinks they can erase truth without consequence. Lead if you must, but lead in grief, not glory. And if they try to crown a new ruler, burn the crown. Kira didn't speak for a long time. And when she did, it was barely a whisper. He's not coming back. No, I said, but he never really left. Outside the station, the galaxy was arguing. The purifiers arrived on day 6. Their fleet docked without permission. They didn't walk the halls. They didn't visit the rooms. They stood on their ships and broadcast one message over and over. Human systems for human rule, unity under strength, purity before peace. They blamed the collapse on Roth's hesitation, said the council didn't fall fast enough, said the revolution had gone soft, said the colonies were still too forgiving of those who had once worn council uniforms. They demanded structure. Uniformity, a Terran-led galaxy with no tolerance for heritage pollution. Kira called them exactly what they were, a mirror of the very thing we had destroyed. On day 7, the Remembered Flame held their own ceremony. They draped Rigel Station in Roth's face. Giant projections, reverent chants, clips of his speeches cut and edited into something unrecognizable, something more God than man. They lit ceremonial fires in the docking bays, sang in unison, and when someone objected, a quiet ex-Terran soldier who had lost his brother to one of Roth's early raids, they beat him to death in the corridor, all in Roth's name. It was Kira who cracked first. She walked into their gathering with nothing but a projector in her hand, and she played the uncut Roth log, the one I had kept hidden, the one where Roth begged for them to not build anything on his bones. And when it finished, she stood before the crowd and shouted, "You love his rage, but you fear his compassion. You want his fire, but not his mercy. You worship his face, but spit on his soul." No one responded. So she turned her back and walked out. They didn't stop her, but they didn't change either. By the 10th day, the coalition was cracking. The provisional government issued a statement calling for a unifying summit. The Flame refused. The Purifiers threatened violence. Several border systems declared neutrality and shut down all communications. The same cycle was beginning again. Different names, same sickness, power. I sat alone in the old control room of Rigel Station, staring out at the growing fleet. 1,000 factions, all pointing guns at one another, claiming to defend the same thing. Roth was right. We didn't know how to live in peace. We only knew how to win. And without an enemy, we'd start turning on each other. The next morning, Kira gathered us all in the central hall. Not just her loyalists. Everyone, the Flame, the Purifiers, the neutral colonies, alien observers, children of the revolution, ghosts of the past, all standing in the same room where Roth had once sat, 12 years old, listening to a machine tell him his parents no longer existed. Kira stood on that same desk. And she didn't ask for silence. She commanded it. "Look around you," she said. "Look what we've done with victory. We've carved it up like a carcass, turned it into slogans and uniforms and rage. You call yourselves Purifiers? You sound like the Council. You chant about fire and remembrance. You murder people in the name of a man who died trying to end that." She pointed to the walls, to the rust, to the blood still dried into the corners. "This place isn't a beginning. It's an ending to a lie, to a system, to a history written in fear." Her voice broke, but only for a second. "And if we can't bury our weapons here, then we never deserved this revolution." Someone tried to interrupt her, a Flame acolyte in red armor. She stepped off the desk, walked up to him, and handed him the drive. "The truth is here. Unedited. Unforgiving. You want to follow Roth?" She looked him in the eye. "Then listen to him." He didn't take it, so she dropped it at his feet and walked away. That night, someone torched a Purifier banner outside the station. The Flame left without a word. And the next morning, Roth's name stopped echoing. Because we finally heard his silence. We always thought the war would end with an explosion, a battle, a coup, a final blood-soaked scream before the silence. But it didn't. It ended with a vote. And that terrified us more than any war ever did. It began 3 days after Rigel Station's final gathering. The fleets pulled back, the banners came down. And for the first time in months, no broadcasts rang out across Council space. No threats, no songs, no speeches, just quiet. Kira stood before what remained of the Terran coalition and asked a question no one wanted to hear out loud. Now that we've torn down everything they built, what do we build in its place? And this time, no one rushed to answer, because now we knew the weight of answers. There were 3 proposals, 3 visions, 3 futures, each one flawed, each one terrifying, each one carried by people who believed they were doing what was right. The Purifiers wanted control. Their proposal was simple, a centralized Terran dominion, run by humans, with an iron command structure, efficient, ruthless, unapologetic. They spoke of protection, of defensive supremacy, of preserving purity through power. They promised security, order, retribution. But we'd heard those words before, just with different uniforms. The remembered Flame wanted symbolism, a permanent Rothian Congress made up of war heroes, revolutionaries, survivors, those who had suffered under the Council the most. They would interpret Roth's teachings, enshrine his words, burn his legacy into every law, every school, every border. They offered identity, culture, ritual, but beneath their reverence was fanaticism. And worship, no matter how noble it starts, always ends in chains. And then, there was Kira's plan. No government, not at first. Not yet. Just time. A 5-year delay, during which every system, colony, and culture would govern itself. Free exchange of information, decentralized law, historical reconciliation councils, mandatory education on the real war, the real cost, no rulers, no flags, no weapons allowed in Rigel space. She didn't promise stability, she didn't offer unity, she offered choice, and it scared the hell out of everyone. Because choice meant we couldn't blame anyone else if we failed. We met on Carven Prime, a neutral moon with no history of war or revolution. 1 table, 9 seats, and too much history in the air to breathe right. Each faction brought a representative. Kira came alone. I came with her, but I didn't speak. She didn't need me to, because every word she said came from a place none of them could touch. From loss. "I'm not here to tell you what Roth wanted," she began. "None of us speak for him. But I do know what he feared." She looked around the table. No matter how righteous a revolution starts, it always ends in someone taking the throne. Silence. Then the Purifier rep, a hard-eyed man named Darren, spoke. "People need order." "They need air more," Kira said. "And sometimes that means we stop building walls for just a little while. Let them breathe." Flame's envoy, a woman in ceremonial crimson, nodded slowly. "And what if they breathe themselves into chaos? Into extinction?" "Then at least it'll be a choice we made," Kira said, "not a chain we inherited." The vote was scheduled for dawn. 3 choices, 3 futures, 1 vote per sector, 1 representative per system. And no second round. The result would be final, and we all knew this was it. Not the Battle of Tirax, not the fall of the Council, not even Roth's silence. This would define us. That night, I sat alone in the fields outside the voting hall. No stars, just ash drifting in the cold wind, blown in from the old council archives they'd burned to make room for the summit dome. It felt poetic. We were voting on the ashes of history. I thought about Roth. I thought about the first time I saw his ship. Black, silent, horrifying in its stillness. Back then I thought he came for war. But now I understood. He came to interrupt the cycle. Not to rewrite it. To end it. Kira found me before sunrise. She didn't speak at first. She just sat down beside me and stared at the same wind-blown ruins. "I used to think victory would feel like justice," she said. "It doesn't," I replied. "No," she whispered. "It feels like a funeral with no body." I looked at her. "You think they'll vote for your plan?" She smiled. Tired. Broken. "Doesn't matter. It matters to me." She didn't answer. Because she knew what I knew. Even if they chose her path, someone would try to steal it later. Someone always does. The vote took 2 hours. The results were sealed in a private channel. Authenticated by 3 neutral systems. At noon, the final tally was announced to the galaxy. The Purifier proposal, 21%, the Flame legacy, 17%, the 5-year delay, 62%. Kira didn't cheer. She didn't even smile. She just closed her eyes. And finally, wept. The war was over. For real this time. Rigel Station was locked, sealed, not destroyed, a message carved into the outer hull in 6 languages. Memory lives here, not power. Do not return with flags. It became the first monument of the new age. No guards, no borders, just space. And a warning. The flame dissolved. Some of them scattered. Some joined the education programs. A few became artists. The Purifiers tried to resist. They made it 3 months. Then the people turned on them, not with violence, with shame. Because this time, the truth got there first. I stayed with Kira, not because I was needed, because I still believed. Not in a government, not in a flag, not even in Roth. Just in the idea that maybe, just maybe, if you bleed long enough, you can bleed something better into being. 5 years passed, then 6, then 10. There were still wars, still corruption, still wounds, but there were also no empires. And that was enough. Sometimes, when the nights are too quiet, I play the last message Roth ever sent. The one no one ever found but me. A personal file. Just a whisper, really. Buried under encryption so old it might have been meant only for his son, or his wife, or maybe just someone who would understand. If you're hearing this, I made it through the fire. But I'm not staying. Because if I stay, they'll turn me into something I'm not. They'll wear my skin like armor. They'll name cities after me. They'll carve my words into monuments I'd burn myself. And I won't let that happen. So if you want to honor me, forget me. Remember the people who never got a chance to be remembered. Remember the ones who didn't survive the first scream. Remember the truth, not the storyteller. That's the only way this ends right. So I did. I never spoke his name again after that day. Not in speeches, not in reports, not in memory scrolls, because the man who saved the galaxy didn't want to be remembered. He just wanted to make sure we never forgot.